Hello! This evening we are going to do a beginner's guide of sorts for the Airbus A320 neo in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. This is the Inibuilds developed A320 that comes with the simulator and has the suffix of V2 on the end. So the original Asobo Airbus was dropped when 2024 came out, so the Inibuilds version of the Airbus is the primary free Airbus you get with the simulator these days. So, I'm going to be working through a functional checklist to get the aeroplane up and running. It doesn't have the full list of things the real flight crew would do, but it has the essential things you can do in the simulator to just walk you through where to look, what to press, what switches to flick, which knobs to turn, and so on and so forth. So if you want a copy of it, you can go over to ko-fi.com and I'll put a link in the notes of the video for this and a pinned comment. So for about the price of a cup of tea or coffee from a cafe, you can get the full checklist. If you're wondering what's in it, I can show you it here, and this is the procedure, the functional procedure, and you can see it's got all of the various places to look around the cockpit with keyboard combinations. It even tells you how to program keyboard combinations if they don't exist to help you out. Okay, so this is all based on the default keyboard profile as well in the simulator, so if you've gone and modified it, you're going to have fun with that. Okay, so as you can see, it goes through quite some detail of getting the aeroplane ready, and we're going to work through this. I'm going to walk you through it, and it should be good fun. So we haven't actually made a flight plan yet. We're sat on the ground at the moment at Stansted Airport, and we're going to fly up to Edinburgh. You've seen me do this route many times in the past, perhaps. I always do it as a demonstration flight because it's quite an easy flight to follow. There's lots involved in it, so you can typically have a SID and a star and an approach and have some discontinuities to solve. So it gives a good example of each part of the typical process of preparing the aeroplane and flying it to the destination. Okay, so let's go off to SimBrief and see how we get on. So we're going to go to the dispatch system at SimBrief, and we're going to create a new flight plan, and we're going to go VFA. We're just going to invent an airline and a flight number. We're going from EGSS, which is the ICAO code for Stansted, and we're going to EGPH, which is the ICAO code for Edinburgh. If you don't know them, you can just search in SimBrief and put them in. Type the name of the airport in and it will tell you the code. Now, the important thing for the A320 neo is we need the A20N is the exact code for the aircraft. Otherwise, SimBrief will get all the performance data wrong and you won't be able to load the flight plan into the aircraft. Because this is half the trick we're doing. We're not going to program the flight plan completely by hand. We're going to use SimBrief and get it to program the flight plan for us. Okay? So, we put the details in and we click Generate Flight. And we're just going to go with whatever it gives us. We're not going to manipulate the flight plan at all. So we will walk through flying this plan. So, what's it given us? Taking off on runway 22 from Stansted, and then you've got some coding here. This actually means your average ground speed expected and your flight level, or altitude, so your cruise altitude. So F340 means flight level 340, which is 34,000 feet. So then we've got the standard instrument departure, so that's UTAV 1R. That takes us to the Utava waypoint. Then we've got the Q75 airway to the Buzad waypoint. Then the T420 airway to the TNT waypoint, or if they're 3 letters, it's a VOR station. Then we've got UN57 airway to the Pole or Pole Hill VOR. Then UN601 to INPIP, which is a waypoint, which takes us into the standard terminal arrival route into Edinburgh. And we've got runway 24 at Edinburgh to suit the wind at the moment. Okay, you can see up here we've got a cruise profile or cost index of 15, and there's our cruise altitude written in feet as well. The nice thing about pulling the flight plan straight in from SimBrief is we're not going to have to program all of this in as we did in the 737. It will be able to load it all in for us quite easily. So, let's go and have a look in the aeroplane, shall we? So I'm going to press a backspace and I'm going to press Shift and C to take us outside. Because this is one of the Asobo Inibuilds aeroplanes, we have to go and interact with it on the ground. So removing the chocks and removing the covers off the engines. You can also do this in the tablet within the aircraft, but it's just nice to show that you can do that. Okay, so then we're going to press Shift and C and go back into the cockpit. So now we are into the pre-flight checklist proper. So press Alt and 1, takes us overhead. We're going to press both of the battery switches in the middle to turn the batteries on. And then various things will light up, and you will see we have external power available because we're at the gate. So we will press it, and that will connect external power to the aircraft and power up a lot more systems than the batteries would have done on their own. We're going to go and put the strobe lights to auto immediately, and we're going to turn the nav and logo light to 1 or 2, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to choose 2 or all the way up, and then we're going to press the APU master switch to on. Then we're going to give it a few seconds and then press the start button for the APU. So the APU is a small jet engine in the back of the aeroplane. You can see it here. So as it winds up, you will see hot air start to pour out of the APU. If you want to see how it's doing in the cockpit, if we press Shift and Space to come back down, if we go and look down here at the ECAM buttons and press the APU button, you can see its status here, which it shows by default. We don't actually have to press APU to get that up. It knows by default to show you the APU on this screen. So when this comes up to speed, you'll see it generate voltage all of a sudden. Look, there's the exhaust gas temperature, it's just ignited. So if we go and look outside, you can see heat pouring out now. And as soon as it gets up to 100%, or I think it does it before it gets to 100, it will start generating electricity. So you can see various bits and pieces are booting up around the cockpit. Obviously we've got nothing showing up here yet, don't worry about that. And we have power. Okay. So back overhead. So I'm going to press Alt and 1 to bring myself overhead. Alt and 1 is a custom key binding. And in the functional procedure, I've got a whole page on how to set up custom views. So back overhead, we're going to go and put the crew supply to on. We're going to arm the emergency exit lights. We are going to turn the no smoking sign to auto. And we're going to go and turn on the ADIRS system. This is the inertial reference system in the Airbus that informs the airplane which way up it is. There's a series of gyros and sensors, and they take a while to calibrate unless you speed it up in the tablet. There is an option in the tablet of the aeroplane to make it align instantly, which I think I've got switched on. Okay, so back in the cockpit, you can influence the brightness of all the displays if they are not bright enough or too bright. So at the moment it defaults to them being full brightness, but you've got the navigation display and the primary flight display, and you've got the same on the co-pilot side. And then these two screens are controlled by these two knobs here. Okay, and I think they're all on 100% brightness by default. But if you were starting at night, you might want to tone them down a bit. Okay, so if we press Shift and 5, that will bring us over to the tablet. We're going to first of all go to the options page and make sure we've got our SimBrief ID typed in. So you can see I've got my SimBrief ID typed in. Then we're going to go to the dashboard page. Now, we generated our flight plan on SimBrief, didn't we? And because it's got that SimBrief ID plugged into the tablet, we can just press the SimBrief button and it will fetch our flight plan that we've just programmed on SimBrief. Okay? So then we can go to the payload page and we can pull the payload from SimBrief. So that tells us how many passengers, how much cargo, and how much fuel to load onto the aeroplane. So we can apply that load. So you then get the option whether you want to do it in a realistic time frame or do it instantly. We'll do it instantly. Okay. So that's applied the load to the airplane. It's got all of the passengers, the cargo, and the fuel on board now. So the next thing we can do is go to the takeoff calculator. And we can sync the weather conditions, so it gives us the current weather. So barometric pressure and wind and temperature are the important factors there. But it also wants us to fill in the weight. So we go back to the payload page and we want the live gross weight, but in tons. So we want 64. Okay, so we go to takeoff and we can put in 64.3 because that's what it actually had, 64.3. So once you've got all the boxes filled out, you can click on calculate. And this calculates the decision speed, the rotation speed, the maximum takeoff weight, the center of gravity calculation, and any trim calculations. So it's saying 0.7 up. Okay, so this will all come into play when we program into the MCDU in a moment. MCDU stands for Multi-Purpose Control and Display Unit, by the way. Okay, so having calculated those numbers, we can actually send some of them straight to the unit. Okay, and that will help us filling out the numbers on the unit in a moment. So we're going to go there now. Alt and 2 will bring us over here. Again, that's a custom key that I've set up. So we've got a message there. We're going to clear it out, clear out anything that was to do with aligning the aircraft and anything. While we haven't been watching this, it's been coming up with messages as we click things overhead. So we just got rid of all of those. We're going to go and press the init button, wait for system response, and we can do an init request. So this is going to fetch from SimBrief. So I press it and wait, and all of our routing information has magically been pulled into the aeroplane. Okay, we can also go and check IRS init, make sure it's all populated, and come back. We can also go to wind. We can do a wind request. It's already got the data from SimBrief, but we can do another wind request if we want. See, it hasn't changed. Okay, and we can come back in. So if we were looking at init, weren't we? So if we go next page on init, we've got the fuel figures. We can clear any messages out on the bottom line. So zero fuel weight, you don't have to look this up in the tablet anymore. They updated it, so you can just press it and it populates. So it's got the zero fuel weight and the center of gravity already in here, and we don't have to fill in block fuel. We can click on fuel planning, wait for it, give it a few seconds, and it will give you your block fuel and ask you to confirm it. So we'll say confirm, and it does a load of calculations and the numbers all populate. So that's all done as well. Okay. So the next thing we do is go to the flight plan, and we're going to, you can see there's our routing has come in from the SimBrief flight plan, but it hasn't got the standard instrument departure or the standard terminal arrival route, so it doesn't know how to leave how to leave Stansted or how to get to Edinburgh. So we go and click on the soft key next to Stansted, select departure, and we need to now go and look at our flight plan to make sure. So we're leaving runway 22 with the UTAV 1R standard instrument departure. So runway 22, and scroll through them. There we go, UTAV 1R, and insert that into the flight plan. Okay, the bottom line is always the destination airport. No matter when you scroll up and down through your route, the bottom line will always be the destination. So we'll go and select Edinburgh, and we'll say arrival, and we'll go and check the flight plan again. Runway 24 and the INP1E standard terminal arrival route will star. So ILS runway 24, that's actually the approach, and INP1E, there it is. Okay, and insert that into our flight plan. So we can now scroll up and down through the flight plan and see if there's any discontinuities. So there's one here at Utava, look. So if we go and clear this and make sure, because the Utava actually appeared twice there, it's a bit of a bug in the aeroplane that it does that, it shouldn't. But you just need to make sure and go and clear any discontinuities. So let's come down, and interestingly look, the 737 got as far as Tartan and wouldn't go to CI24. It put a discontinuity, and the Airbus is quite happy with that, which is interesting to me. So we'll leave everything as it is, So there are no further discontinuities. If we have a look, that's the run into the airport. There is one right on the end here. Look, we can clear that out, clear that manual leg out, clear this discontinuity off, and it's nice and neat and tidy now. And we can click on flight plan to come back up to the top of the flight plan. Okay. So the next thing to do is the perf button, so performance data. So the numbers came through into here for decision and rotate speeds from the tablet when we calculated them and we sent the data across. So we have to rekey it. There's no shortcut built into this. So 138 and 141. Okay. And again, for the flaps THS, we need to go and look at the tablet. Okay, so if we go press Shift and Space, and go and look and see if we can find it. So flaps are flaps 1. It's in there. Look, configuration 1 means flaps 1, and the THS is 0.7 up. So if we go and look back over here, we want flaps 1. Then a slash, and then 0.7 up, and that's our trim setting for takeoff. So we'll drop that in, and we've got flex temp as well to fill in, 58 degrees centigrade. So we just put in 58 and drop that in. Okay, it's asking us at the bottom right to confirm the takeoff data, so we'll press it. Takeoff data uplink has happened, so we can clear the message out. And we're pretty much there. So after doing that, on the if you go and click on performance, you can see next phase. So you've got the climb data. You can change that, you don't have to. You can see it's got the cost index of 15 already. It got that from the sim brief plan. And we can go next phase, you've got the cruise there again. Next phase, descent, and then approach. And approach has got some data missing from it. We don't fill in approach typically until we are getting close to approach. And you will get a reminder on the main screen to go and do it. Okay, so you'll be filling in the barometric air pressure at the destination, the temperature, the wind, and baro and radio refer to your decision height. I've never really explained this in a video before. So depending on the type of approach you're doing, you can either use the altitude above sea level, which is your baro altitude of the runway, or your altitude, your decision height above sea level, which is your the barometric altitude, or you can use the radio altitude above the runway, which is your, obviously radio altitude. So this tends to be for Cat 3, and this is for Cat 1, so this is non-precision approaches. This is for precision approaches. Also, you get landing configuration to choose from. So you get Conf 3, which would be flaps 3 or full, and it's set to full. It's worth pointing out you can only put one of these in. So I'll just quickly show you that before we actually get there, while we're sat here on the ground doing things. So let's go to Navigraph, and we'll import our flight from SimBrief. And it's this one. So there's the basics of our flight. Notice SimBrief never has the approach. So we're going to select ILS runway 24, and that will draw it in. But the thing we really want to see is the chart. So on the approach chart, what we're looking for here is this. Decision height, look. 106 feet. Yeah, so 106 feet above sea level, 50 feet above the runway on a Cat 3. Cat 2 is 106 feet on the radio or radar altimeter, 200 feet above sea level. Sorry, I said that backwards earlier, didn't I? So the decision altitude, 200 feet above sea level, 106 feet above the runway, or 50 feet on Cat 3. So those are the numbers that you can put into those boxes. But anyway, we're not going to dwell on that too much. I'll do it when we're getting closer to approach. So we've finished with that part of configuring the airplane. Shift and 7, or before we do that, we're going to press comma to shortcut calibrating the altitude, or the barometric pressure for the altitude, for the altimeter. So the way you can do that by hand is if you go and look at the current weather report for the airport. So if we go to Stansted and open the airport, go to the weather, you can see the current altimeter setting is 1002 hectopascals, or 29.59 inches. So by default the Airbus is metric, so we're in hectopascals. So it was 1004. Oh, it's saying 1002 here. So the sim's actually a little bit out. So we can just change it here by rolling the knob, yeah, and you'll see that changes on the primary flight display. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is go and look at the flight guidance control panel. So Shift 7, and it's this panel in the glare screen of the Airbus. So this controls the autopilot, basically. It controls the mode the aeroplane is running in. So at the moment you can see we've got selected mode all the way across, so we've got numbers showing up basically, meaning the airplane's going to try and do what's on here. If we press the flight directives, because we programmed the flight plan, notice it's changed. So in other words, the flight director is going to control the airplane now, not us, if we switch the autopilot on. And it knows on the flight plan what speed it should be going, what heading it should be going, and what altitude. It doesn't know what altitude to get to immediately. That's still up to you. So we are going to tell it to get to 34,000 feet. I think that was the altitude, wasn't it? Yeah, 34,000. The dots next to each setting mean managed mode. So managed mode is the aeroplane makes the decisions. Selected mode means no dot, means we make the decision. So to get managed or selected, you push the knobs towards the aeroplane to go to managed. So pushing the top half of the button in is the way Flight Sim does this. Pushes the knob in, so the knob is towards the aeroplane, means the aeroplane makes the decision, the dot has appeared. If we click the bottom half, it pulls the knob, and the number comes back up. We are choosing the airspeed. Yeah, and the autopilot will try to follow it. Obviously within limits, it won't let you do anything crazy. If you press it forwards, it will forget that and go back to managed mode. So notice when I pull it again, it goes back to 100. The reason for that, normally you'll be in managed mode, but the reason for that is when you pull the speed knob, it will take on whatever speed you're doing at that moment. Yeah? So if you wanted to do a vertical speed climb instead of a managed climb, you can pull the vertical speed knob and then dial in the rate of climb or descent you want. Okay? So obviously if you want the airplane to do managed mode, you push in the altimeter knob and the dot comes back up. So hopefully that's clear. Something else that's really handy when you're looking at the navigation display, obviously you can change the range, but you can also show constraints. So during a typical departure from an airport, you will have altitude and speed constraints in play. So this will show it on the navigation display. Okay. If you want to check your route to make sure it makes sense, you can do it by pulling up the flight plan page on the MCDU and switch the navigation to plan mode. Notice it's put a marker on the screen and there's one of the lines is white, D221C. Okay, so as we scroll up or down through the plan, so if we scroll up, it pushes all the waypoints that way. We can go through our plan a line at a time. Okay, and you can just keep doing it to walk all the way through your plan, just to make sure it makes sense. So we just keep clicking, and you can see it's got it made a bit of a mess here with turning in. We'll see what happens when we get closer, because yeah, we'll have a play with this when we get there. We may have to change the routing slightly. It's quite poor at figuring out speeds and altitudes, and again, in the real world you wouldn't come straight into CI24 at that angle to turn sort of, you know, 290 degrees left. So you might go from Tartan to Lama. That's how we modified it on a previous plan. Let's try it. So if we go Lama and drop that in on top of CI24, it's Lama 55 north, and then we've got Tartan, then Lama. And if we look on the navigation display, if we zoom out, you can see what we're doing. We're proposing going that way before we go to CI24. Yeah, so I'll show you this on the map. If we load it into a little nav map, that makes a bit more sense to see it. So I'm going to go and open the flight plan from SimBrief, download it, create the flight plan. So we're looking up here. We haven't selected our approach yet. So we're coming into Tartan, and we are going to say show the arrival procedures. Approach is the ILS into, so there's that crazy turn that the airplane was going to have a job doing. So what we're proposing is we add Lama to the flight plan. So in order to do that in a little nav map, what you can actually do is turn all of the procedures into waypoints somehow, and I can never remember how to do this. Where is it? Oh, yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much on it. But we want to effectively, instead of doing the straight route, we want to go out that way and then back onto the route we were on. Yeah? So we've asked it to go to Lama. We haven't confirmed it yet. Yeah? So we have to insert that into the flight plan. If we go, and you can see Lama there, but because we've meddled with the flight plan, it's introduced a discontinuity. So we need to go and clear that out. And we can now see we're going Tartan, Lama, and then in, and it's making the turn now. Yeah? Hopefully that's instructive. So it just shows, there's our standard instrument departure, by the way, so leaving Stansted. It's quite pretty, doesn't it? So if we drop it into 10 miles, we can see it quite neatly there. Okay, so we put the navigation display back onto ARC mode, so that's aircraft oriented, ready for action a bit later on. So back overhead, we're going to go and put the seatbelt sign to on. All the way up. The electric section in the middle, we're going to turn the external power off now, because obviously we've been on the APU for ages. We're actually burning fuel while we're talking about things. And we can do pushback. So before we do that, we need to go down to the tablet, go to the ground section and remove the GPU. So GPU removed. Okay. So these controls on the tablet will control the pushback, so they are really helpful. This shade, by the way, appears because think that there's a click spot for it behind the tablet, and if you click in the right place on the tablet, it causes it to appear. Anyway, so outside, we're going to press Alt and P to initiate the pushback. We've got the parking brake on at the moment, so the airplane's not going to go anywhere. So we'll just wait for the pushback truck to get into place, and then we'll jump back in the cockpit and tell it to push to the left, or to our left. Okay, so if I go and release the parking brake, we should start moving very soon. There we go, and we'll go left, which avoids the simulator getting it wrong, basically. So at this point we could start the engines while we're being pushed back. We're going to wait. Just so we can do things in a methodical, explained manner. So we've got lots of time. We're not running on the clock here. Okay, so you can just press Alt and P to stop the pushback. So we'll stop it there. and put our parking brake back on. And we can concern ourselves with getting ready for flight. So we're going to press Alt and 1 to go back overhead. We're going to go and put the beacon light on. Okay, then we're going to turn on all of the fuel pumps. And we're going to put the APU bleed on, which is the feed of compressed air from that small jet engine in the back of the aeroplane that will provide the air to spin up the turbines. And then we're going to go and start the engines. So this is actually very straightforward in the Airbus. So I'm going to use my actual controls to do this. So just to go and double check, we've got the APU bleed on. Okay. So down here, I'll get both of these in view, because you're going to watch this screen as we do. We're going to manipulate these controls. So turn the ignition to start, and you can see the screen comes up to show the engine at the bottom screen. And we're going to advance the starter for engine number 2, or the right engine, and you can see the N2 number is going up. So it's a fully automatic system. We don't have to introduce fuel or anything ourselves in the Airbus. It will just spin the engine up all on its own. So you can keep an eye on this number until it gets to about 55%, I think it is. At which point it will do the bus transfer of the electricity automatically for it as well. We don't even have to worry about that. You'll hear a clunk usually when it happens. Depends which version of the Airbus. There was a quiet clunk then. Okay, so that engine is started. So we can immediately advance engine number 1. So now the compressed air from the APU is being used to spin up engine number 1. So you can see N2 is the turbine axle speed, essentially. So it's the gas turbine speed. N1 is the turbofan speed. So if you've never seen a diagram of a turbofan engine, the exhaust from the gas turbine drives a propeller, or an impeller then, inside the engine that drives an axle that drives the big fan on the front of the engine. So the big fan on the front of the engine is actually free floating. So the thrust from the gas turbine drives a fan inside the engine that drives the big fan that drives thrust past the engine. It's kind of counterintuitive, but also kind of brilliant. Okay, so once the engine has come up to speed and the highlight has gone out, we can turn the ignition system back to off. So having done that, we can go back overhead. I'll do this just by moving the camera. APU bleed can come off, and the APU can be switched off. Okay, so then we're going to go and move the flaps to takeoff position. Remember, we wanted flaps 1. And then we're going to go to transponder and TCAS over here. We're going to put it on TA and auto mode and turn it on. So this is your transponder and your traffic collision avoidance system. Obviously if you're using ATC, they'll give you a transponder code when you get your clearance. So what's next? Over on the left hand side, so get this handle out of the way, we want to advance the wind shear, predictive wind shear to number 1 and pull the ground spoiler lever up, which pressurizes all of the cylinders so they'll come up really quickly if we need them. And then we're going to go turn the parking brake off in a moment. The other thing we can do, you can do this anywhere between here and the runway, to be honest, is go and put the auto brakes on max. Okay, so it means if they do kick in, they'll be on max. Okay, so we'll get our view sorted out, and we want the taxi light on now. So the taxi light is just overhead there, and we can taxi to the runway. So come off the parking brake. We We should get a small amount of positive thrust in the Airbus. You can see it's just rolling at idle. That's normal. So we're going to press Alt and 7, which is my key for switching head tracking on. And we're all out to the runway, so press Shift and Space to recenter the view. So we are taking off runway 22, so we can pull out straight onto the apron here. We haven't got much of a taxi today, which is good. Obviously I'm not using ATC today because I want to explain everything as we go. So just before we pull out onto the runway, we are going to stop here, put the parking brake on for a moment, so we've got time to look at this properly. We're going to go and put the landing lights on, we're going to put the strobes to fully on, and most importantly down here, we're going to go and look at this and see if there's anything left for us to do. So this is all looking good, look. Flaps are in takeoff position, spoilers are armed, cabin is ready, signs are on, auto brake is on max, so the last thing to do is the takeoff config test. So watch the sign. If we've done everything right, we press that button and it changes to normal. Okay, so we've done everything. So in other words, that has self-checked the aeroplane to see have we got everything as it should be. So let's go and roll out onto the runway. So if the takeoff config doesn't change, it means you've missed something. And it will usually be lit up in blue on the display. I think it's blue. It might be red actually on the Airbus, I can't remember. Okay, so we've pretty much done everything. So landing lights are on. Oh, we can put the nose light to take off as well, which just makes it brighter, essentially. So during the takeoff roll, I'll explain it now before we do it. We're going to put the throttles all the way forwards to toga. Then we rotate when we come through the V speeds, so the VR speed marked on the indicated airspeed ribbon. We're going to look for a 15-degree climb and get the gear up as soon as we're off the runway. We're going to leave flaps on flaps 1 for a while. Okay? So, here we go. So I'm going to turn off the head tracking to do this, just so you can see it. We're using quite a lot of right rudder. The wind does affect the big jets quite a lot because of the size of their tail. So I'm holding it on the centre line. You'll see it crab as soon as we rotate. So there we go through rotating now. So nose up gently. Yeah, look at it crabbing. Gear up. And autopilot on. Throttles to the climb descent. So what I mean by that is I've pulled the throttles back so this little marker matches the CL, and I've let go of them, which means the aeroplane can now take full control of doing that for us. Okay, so I have not raised the flaps yet, and that's why. Look at this climb out. So you wait Let's put the this back on arc mode, where I was explaining things earlier. We're not getting to see what's going on. I should have done that before we took off, really. The other thing I didn't do on the runway is adjust the trim. Obviously the Autopilot's doing it for us, but you can, if it's a large amount of trim, it pays to adjust it before you take off to match the trim on the performance calculations. If it's only like, 0.5 or 0.2 or something small, there's not real much point in doing it. So you can see the aeroplane is obeying the constraints. It's come out to 4,000 and is holding there. So if we go and have a look at the standard instrument departure chart, between 3,000 and 4,000 feet, look, until Barkway. Then it wants 4,000 feet at Utava, and then it will climb. So it's holding. So it wants to be above 3,000. We're already at 4,000, look. So all we need to worry about is changing the barometric pressure when we go through the transition altitude. So if we go and look at that standard instrument departure chart, it tells you up the top the transition altitude is 6,000 feet here. So at that point, we will pull this knob. If you look on the end of it, it says pull STD. So pull for standard barometric pressure. So the reason you're doing that is when you're near the ground, so below 6,000 feet in this case, your primary concern is how far away is the ground. Once you're above the transition altitude, your primary concern is what is your altitude related to other aircraft. So if all aircraft tune their altimeters the same way, then if one aircraft says it's at 10,000 feet, for example, and another says it's at 10,000 feet, they are at the same altitude as each other as long as they've set their altimeters up the same way. Also, something worth knowing about, which a lot of people don't seem to realise, is below the transition altitude, altitudes are expressed in feet, so 3,000 feet, 4,000 feet, so on. Above the transition altitude, they are expressed in flight levels. So say we were climbing to 34,000 feet, we would say to a controller, we are climbing to flight level 340. Because remember, a flight level is 100 feet. So 340 times 100 is 34,000. Okay, so we're going to go and remove the flaps. While I was busy talking, we could have pulled the flaps already. But notice that's the magic of the Airbus. It flew up to the constraint for the flaps and didn't go beyond it. As soon as we removed them, it accelerated. It was only a 20 knot difference. But it would have been following the speed numbers for the flaps. See, it was at 230 on flaps 1 and 250 is the speed limit below 10,000 feet. So that was kind of a happy accident that I did that, so you got to see it. Okay, so you can see throttle has gone to climb. It's in climb mode. It's going to climb now. We can increase the range on this display. So there's no constraints at the next waypoint. So it's just climbing out to cruise altitude now. You'll notice as well the navigation display is saying TA only. We could switch to TARA now, which means that not only is our aircraft broadcasting its position, it will also react if necessary to other aircraft. Okay, so we've gone through the transition altitude, 6,000 feet, look. The aircraft knows and it's flashing the QNH at us. So we need to pull the barometric pressure knob, and it's gone to STD now, which essentially means either 1013 hectopascals or 29.92 inches. So now above the transition altitude, our altimeter agrees in terms of actual altitude with other aircraft. It may not be the correct altitude above sea level, but relative to each other it will read the same. Okay, so you can see the aircraft has come through 10,000 feet and the target airspeed increased. You saw the nose dip because above 10,000 feet the 250 knot speed limit goes away. Also above 10,000 feet commercial traffic no longer need landing lights on, so we can go and turn all the lights off. And then another thing that can happen above 10,000 feet is you'll typically see actually first the cabin crew will be allowed to get up and start doing things. They'll keep the passengers in the seats for a while longer, perhaps even until we get to cruise altitude before you let the passengers get up. But typically at 10,000 feet is when the cabin crew will be allowed to start getting on with their work, and the pilots may chime by wiggling the switches overhead. They may chime the cockpit on purpose, so I don't know if you've ever noticed that. You've been on a flight and you hear the chimes. They're usually signals for the cabin crew from the flight deck. So they do that literally and if an aircraft model has a chime button they can use it, otherwise they'll just toggle one of the switches to cause it to make the noise. Okay, so there's not much else to do in the Airbus, and obviously unless ATC, if you were using ATC they might give you different instructions along the way because something might have happened or they might have to reroute you, whatever it is. But in terms of our simple example today, that's it until we get to top of descent when we have some interesting things to deal with. So if you look on the map and zoom far enough out, you will see top of climb is marked. And if we look far enough downrange, I don't know if we can see far enough on this map. Yeah, you can. So you can see there's top of climb, there's top of descent. So I'm going to pause recording and I'll be back with you. Let's go and turn the seatbelt sign off just before we do say goodbye. So seatbelt signs off. So the screen's completely clear here now. Going to get the stewardesses coming through, or the stewards, with something to eat maybe and a drink. Notice on this version of the Airbus the co-pilot screen is not synchronized. I'm not sure if that's an option. We can go and have a look for that, I guess, but we need to go and pull the barometric pressure on his side as well. So he's got a completely separate set, so you can see that as well with the range on his navigation display is different. So we'll set him to 80 miles as well. It's good, isn't it? It's worth having a little look as well at the options you've got down here. So you've got the flight plan showing up on the screen. Obviously you can scroll through it. You've also got a progress button, which will show you the phase of the flight you're in. Don't know if we can do anything around the ATSU functions in this version. ATSU, ATC, yeah, there's a lot that's not in here. Let's go and have a look at, we can't do a weather request, for example. It's a bit of a shame, yeah. So maybe they'll bring that to it in a later version. But aircraft have a way of requesting weather updates from the ground built into the MCDU. Some of them, yeah, there's a printer, but I don't think it's functional in this version of the Airbus. But some of them you can actually get a printout of the weather and then tear it off and put it on the dash. It's quite clever. Anyway, I'm going to leave you for the moment. Obviously you can see we're busy climbing out, and it's projecting we'll get to top of climb just past the Elvos waypoint. So I'm going to leave you here, and I'll come back to you when we're at top of descent. So for you it will be instantaneous. For me it's going to be about half an hour. Okay, we've reached cruise altitude, but something has happened that I want to show you inside the cockpit, which is quite instructive. A message has come up at the bottom of the flight plan page saying destination EFOB below min. Okay, we'll clear that message out. If we go and look in performance, so we're in cruise, destination EFOB, what it means is estimated fuel on block 1.6. So that's a setting that was in the flight plan. But obviously the weather has changed en route, meaning the aeroplane isn't going to have that much fuel when it gets to the destination. Yeah? So it's just warning us of that fact. So we could lower that number if we wanted. We could just say 1. And drop, we can't actually look, it's built in. So all it's warning us is just to go and have a look, and to go and look at the data on the flight plan. So if we go sideways, you can get more data, and you can get EFOB, estimated fuel on block, down through the route. So if we go all the way down through the plan, it's going to be a close run thing. Look, it is going to be 1.6, but it's obviously borderline. Yeah? It's an interesting one, isn't it? So if we go next phase, and next phase, we can go and put our destination data in, seeing as we're here now anyway. We're about 70 miles out from top of descent. It gives us lots of time to do it. So we're looking to fill in. So to get to that, I go to the performance page, I go next phase, and we've got the approach configuration. So QNH. So we pull up Edinburgh. So we go to airports, we want Edinburgh, and we go to weather, and the QNH at Edinburgh is going to be 998 hectopascals. So 998 goes into the scratch pad and then drop it in. Temperature on the ground at Edinburgh is going to be 8 degrees centigrade. The direction and speed of the wind, 210/5. 210/5. And again, we've got these decision heights. So to figure that out, if you remember, we can go and look on the ILS chart, and it will give you our decision charts. I think we've got Cat 3 available. And obviously this aircraft supports Cat 3, so yeah. So we've got a decision height of 50 feet. Okay, so we can put a radio height in of 50 feet above the ground. The reason I know it's radio and not baro is you can't use a radio height on Cat. You can only use the radio heights on Cat 3. If you didn't have radio heights, you wouldn't have Cat 3. So that means basically the aeroplane can get to within 50 feet of the ground before we make our decision. If we didn't have that, we'd be 100 feet above the ground or 200 feet above sea level. Notice if we try and say that, if we try and say 200 feet above sea level, it will wipe out the 50 feet above the ground. But we've got Cat 3, so we can put in 50 feet above the ground. By the same token, we could say we're going to land with flaps 3, or we're going to land with full flaps. Notice what that changes over here. So it's recalculating things depending on our choices. So once you've done that, the only other thing that's going on here is the aeroplane's telling us that it's transferred fuel So that's just a notification, it's not a warning. Okay, so we've still got a little way to go until top of descent, so I'm going to leave it there. I just thought that was interesting for you to see that the estimated fuel on block notification had come up. Basically, it wasn't a warning as such, it's just, you know, you need to have a look at this, please. It usually it implies there's been a weather change, and yeah, look at the wind. We've got a 71 knot crosswind at the moment. So obviously the weather has changed from when we took off to while we're en route, which has changed our fuel planning slightly. You can see something else that was worth pointing out actually. The lights over here do not indicate what mode it's in. You should always use the messaging across the top of the primary flight display to know what mode the aircraft is flying in. Okay, so it's in cruise mode, it's doing nav mode, which means it's following the waypoints. We've got a decision height of 50 feet using radio altimeter, so 50 feet below the airplane, so the runway basically. We're using autopilot number 1, we're using both the flight directors are on and the auto throttle is in operation. So you could switch to autopilot number 2, it won't matter. When you are on final approach, you can switch both autopilots on. You'll see me do it later. So you have levels of redundancy involved when you are on approach. So the aeroplane knows what phase of flight it's in and will allow both autopilots to be used at once. Okay. I'm going to go and I'll be back in a couple of minutes because we're almost at top of descent, so see you in a moment. Okay, we're getting fairly close to top of descent now. I thought it might be a good opportunity to explain a little bit. I didn't really go into this when we were taking off. So we targeted 34,000 feet on the autopilot and it obeyed automatically because it's in managed mode. It obeyed any constraints that were on the flight plan. So you can see it's got various numbers along the route and some of them have got stars against them. So if you scroll through, you can see some of them got stars, meaning that's a constraint. So if we go and have a look at the approach in, we need to be at flight level 260 or 26,000 feet at INPIP. So look on here, INPIP, star FL260, INREV, star FL200. So notice the markings. That means be at flight level 200. At Tartan it means flight level 070. Also notice there's a speed restriction at Tartan. So if we scroll a little bit further on, Tartan, star 230. Star FL070. It's also got the it's anticipating we're going to come down to through 10,000 feet, so it's saying 250 look automatically. That's not something on the chart, that's to do with us coming down through 10,000 feet in between there. So it's going to try to get to 250 knots. So top of descent has been reached. Yeah, so we're late doing the descent. So we're going to tell it to come down now to 3,000 feet. Managed mode, go for it. So you'll notice a green dot has gone shooting off here. That's the profile for the descent. Now we are behind on the descent because we reached top of descent while I was talking. So the aeroplane is descending probably more steeply than it should to try and catch up. If it can't catch up, we can use the spoilers to help. So I'm going to extend the spoilers briefly. So you can see it's saying speed brake over here, which will allow it to descend even more steeply. So look at the descent level coming up. 4,400, 4,500, 4,600 feet a minute. We're catching back up with the profile. So this is the estimated profile. If we stay on this dot, keep it in the middle, we'll be descending on profile to match the flight plan. So I'm going to take the spoilers back away now. And you'll see the nose probably come up ever so gently, because we don't need to be descending quite so steeply. So those few seconds I lost while I was talking at the top of descent, and again, this is all about reaching in-pip at flight level 260. So you have lots of information to go on during your descent to know if you're on plan. So I'm now slightly lower than the plan, or the aeroplane is, but it will correct as it goes. So let's go and check while we are on the way in. Go and look at the chart for Edinburgh, and we've got a transition altitude of 6,000 feet again. Okay, and we're not strictly following this chart, remember. We're going to get to Tartan, fly out to Lama. In the real world, the controller would give you instruction once you get to Tartan. Yeah? So it's worth saying here, look, there's that final part that's on the chart we're using just for reference. Do not proceed beyond Tartan without ATC clearance. So they would give you vectors to either follow the DME arc or to fly out and do something else. Typically, they might let you continue on for a while and then turn you to the reciprocal and then give you landing clearance. Okay, so we can see, look, we're pretty much nailing it. The green dot is aiming to get us to in-pip at flight level 260, and it's pretty much going to do it. There's the target altitude coming. And it will have factored the winds and everything in along the way to do it. One of the most common mistakes you'll see with flying the Airbuses is people don't program the winds in, and therefore the descent calculations go out the window. So you can see we're falling behind on the descent now, so we might have to help the aeroplane unless it brings it back. No, it's bringing it back. You just need to keep an eye on it. Remember, it's managed speed as well, so the aeroplane will have factored in time to decelerate. If it can't do it, it will ask you up at the top left of the primary flight display to help it. So you'll see the power varying as the autopilot commands different power levels. So it's falling behind at the moment, look, so should we help it? We're going to go and give it some speed brakes. And give it 2 notches of speed brake, and it's going to try and pull the profile back. Here it comes, just gently. There's no need to go mad. So let's look at this from outside. So you can see there, look, we've got the speed brakes extended. We're just helping the aeroplane, because obviously it can only glide at a certain speed. So it's trying to decelerate as well, look, because it's coming down now. It's getting closer and closer to 10,000 feet when it knows it will have to get below 250 knots. And you can see there's a constraint there. It wants us to do that by escdo. And then to drop to 230 knots and 7,000 feet at Tartan. So even though we only programmed in take us straight to 3,000, which is our last target, it's obeying all of the constraints along the way, fully automatically. So we're going to take the speed brakes back away. We don't need them because it's back on plan. We can reduce the range on the map. We'll leave the co-pilot's one on that range for the moment. So we're going to go and tell the passengers to go and sit down now. Not to sit down, to go and put their seatbelts on. It's funny, isn't it? We've got this wonderful world simulated outside and we're just obsessing over the instruments to follow the flight plan accurately. So look, we're falling above the plan again. It wants to get to 250 knots, that's why. It's levelled out to lose speed, so I've thrown the flaps, the spoilers all the way out to help it slow down. To get to 250 knots. Which is why it's gone wildly above the profile. But if we leave the spoilers out, it will catch up with itself, because once it gets to 250 knots, it will hold that speed by descending more quickly. Because it can use obviously the spoilers to its benefit at that point. So let's go and, while we're waiting for that, go and remind ourselves. So we want 998 hectopascals once we get to 6,000 feet. I'll probably forget by the time we get there and have to look again. So we're now just above 250 knots and it's doing its best. So we'll probably, the profile descent will probably crawl back up the display in a moment. Of those flaps. Looks incredible, doesn't it? And yet here we are sat in the cockpit obsessing over instruments. So we've got a 44 knot tailwind, that's why we're having a job slowing down. Although this is indicated airspeed, so we're moving with the body of air. So it makes no difference to us really. Ground speed, the disparity to ground speed will be enormous. But in terms of just slowing down, we are slowing down in the body of air. So it looks like we're going to be running the spoilers all the way to try and catch up. Because we've put the dogleg out to Lama, it will help us. We've got more time. So we may be a little bit high coming through Tartan. So that's really a failing of this this version of the Airbus. It didn't factor everything into slowing down and descending. Therefore, it's got the profile slightly wrong. So we're essentially having to ride the brakes all the way down the descent. So here comes 10,000 feet. So when you're within 500 feet of 10,000, you can go and activate the landing lights. So we're commercial traffic. So we can have a look at them from outside. And there they are. In fact, in this cloud, you might even see the cone of them in front of us. Not quite. It's a foggy old day, isn't it? So 9,000 feet and descending. So our next point of call is to put 998 hectopascals in when we get to 6,000 feet. We still haven't caught up with the descent profile. So we're going to be a little bit high as we come through. But we only need to get to 3,000. We've got a long way to go to get to 3,000 feet. So we will catch up with ourselves. See, look, ice detected. It wants the engine anti-ice on, so we can go and do that. Put the wing anti-ice on as well. We can go and force the probe heats on as well. And here comes the profile. So it's more or less caught back up with itself by the time we got to Tartan. So 1,000 more feet. Yeah, I'm going to leave the spoilers out a little bit longer because it wants to get to 230 knots now. Look, the target airspeed has dropped, so we're helping it do it, and then it's going to catch up the descent profile. Let's pull this into a bit closer range again. Spoilers in. So while we are flying out to Lama, let's go and check the ILS. So 108.9, 240 degrees. It should be programmed in automatically on the Airbus. So we go to Navrad, ILS 108.9 is 239 degrees it's got. So that should come in as part of the routing information. So we've got a speed error at Tartan. Yeah, it means, in other words, yeah, look, we were over the speed we should have been. When we came in over 10,000 feet, we were about 5 or 6 knots over, I think. So again, like I said, this version of the Airbus doesn't stay within limits too easily, so you need to keep an eye on it. So we're down to 6,000 feet. We need to go and push the knob towards the airplane, and we want 998 hectopascals. I think it was. Where's Navigraph? 998, yeah. And is it synchronized? No, it isn't. So we need to do the same on that side. So remember, it's aiming to get to 3,000 feet by the time we get to the next waypoint. So it's slowed the descent rate right down. Look, 500 feet a minute now. Should we have a look outside? So we can see the ground below us now. There's a wind farm and a half. So we're actually below the profile. Oh, it's just corrected. Oh, it's jumping around, look. Doesn't quite know what to command at the moment. Because we've asked for 3,000. So yeah, that's almost certainly a bug. But we can see it's broadly on track to do what we've asked it to do. So we've got a tiny bit of ice forming on the nose. So that cold weather and obviously whistling down through those clouds has not been fun for the aeroplane. So we can go and put the auto brakes on if we wish to. We'll wait until we're on finals. I tend to leave the MCDU on the flight plan page. You'll notice the estimated fuel on block has gone up. We had a tailwind for quite a while, didn't we? and the wind got up, so it may have helped us. But, you know, we were within essentially 100 kilograms of fuel of it being over the limit or not. Okay, so you can see the airport is coming. Last turn onto finals is coming. As soon as we come out of that last turn, we will switch to landing system mode. We could do it on this side already actually, because we've got both screens in operation. So if I go landing system, this shows the ILS. So that's the direction of the runway relative to us. Obviously you can see it there. So this is an HSI, horizontal situation indicator. That's the CDI, course deviation indicator. And you can see at the moment there's an arrow there pointing that the ILS is above our current position. As we approach it, that will turn into a diamond and start to sweep down. You can also turn the landing system on here, which will show the guidance system here as well. So that means the centre line is off to our right at the moment, which is correct. Look, the centre line is in front of us but to the right, and the aeroplane's going to start turning now, look, towards the centre line. So we can start to introduce the flaps. Look, so flaps 1 is 230 knots limit, we're below 230, so we're going to go flaps 1. So aeroplane is turning towards the centre line. Let's reduce the range on the co-pilot's display. And you can see the diamond is now formed for the glide slope. Here comes the centre line, the CDI, course deviation indicator. When that's in the middle, we're on the centre line. You can see that's the radio signal there for the centre line. So we're going to go before the diamond gets to halfway. If you're going to use approach mode, you have to do it when you are below the glide slope. So we're going to engage approach mode. As soon as we have approach mode on, we can switch on both autopilots. Notice the symbology here has changed. We can also look at the speed limits. For flaps 2 is 200 knots. We're below 200. We can go flaps 2. And we can also put the gear down now. So the glide slope is coming. Watch the descent rate. We're about to hit the glide slope, and there we go. It's now following the glide slope down to the runway. It's also brought all the speed off for landing, so we can go full flaps. And somewhere out in the mist in front of us, in a few moments, the runway will appear. This has been a really good example actually, because the weather was so horrid on the way in. So we had to use the instruments, which is what the Airbus is so good at.
2,500.
So this is reading out altitude above the ground, not the altimeter. Makes sense? So there's your altitude, there's your radio or radar altitude, and there's your barometric altitude. I'm having trouble speaking there. Notice there's a difference between them, because the airfield is about, well, this will obviously change as we break land as well. So the airfield's about 106 feet, I think it is, above sea level. So it's got some things to check. So it wants the spoilers armed. Landing gear is down, spoilers are armed, flaps are full, everything's good. Signs means the seat belts and the no smoking. So shall we let it auto land? I very, very rarely let the simulator auto land. I usually take over and fly it myself. Remember, we had a decision height of 50 feet, so actually let's do it. So I'm going to go and turn off So it's doing a Cat 3. It could do a full auto land. Actually, I'm going to let it, because I want you to see it go to flare mode and do the whole thing. Because it's got Cat 3 dual, means we've got both of the autopilots running, and it will switch and show. I think it will show flare on the Airbus as well. Let's see what it says when it gets a bit closer. So we can see this coming in. Can't see the airport yet. So let's see what the symbology says. See, it's switched to TA only, all on its own. That's interesting as well. So that means basically the autopilot's going to take no notice of nearby air traffic now. There's the runway just coming out of the murk right in front of us. Do you know what? I'm going to take over. So I'm in control. Let's give the wings a bit of a wiggle just to prove it.
300. 200.
That's the warning about the... Oh, I have to hit it on the stick these days, don't I? They've made that accurate.
Seat brake.
100. The minimum 40.
Yeah, it did
30.
come up with flare mode. It could have done it itself.
20. Retard. 10. Retard. 5. Retard. Retard.
So reversers are on. Spoilers are out. Wheel brakes are on. Cool, isn't it? Reverse off. Let's put the tracking on. So obviously this is where you would get ground clearance. So retract the landing lights, switch the nose light to taxi, and strobe lights can go back to auto, and we can taxi in. Yeah, I gave into temptation. I think the more practice you can get at landing the planes is always the better. And I know I'm always jumping aeroplanes every flight, so a lot of that practice goes out the window, but if you don't practice, you lose the skills. And we floated a little bit, and that's just knowing the aeroplane. So when it was shouting retard at me, I'd already pulled the throttles back to 0. We're going to find somewhere to park. That was interesting for a demonstration flight because so many different things came up. Covered a lot of ground of, you know, useful and interesting topics. So we can turn the nav system back to nav or arc. Doesn't make any difference now. Notice the flight plan's vanished. We're going to have the same problem we had the other day with a demonstration flight. There was nowhere to park when we got here. We'll pull in past this vision jet and ignore him completely. Sorry, mate, we're about to lunch you in our engines. Okay, parking brake is on. So we have some options now. We could either fire up the APU to then switch the engines off without losing power, or we should be able to come in here and say, give us a GPU please. So if we look outside, they've plugged the ground power unit into the aeroplane. We don't get any option for cones, do we, with this one? But anyway, once we've done that, we can use the external power, and I'm going to use my switches on my controllers. So watch the switches. I'm going to shut the engines down. Also, we can go for lights. We can turn the beacon lights off, turn the nav lights off, turn the taxi lights off. Seat belts can come off now, so everybody can go and run riot in the cabin. Can turn off the emergency lights. The heating systems can be also be switched off. Obviously, we could have done that earlier. Fuel pumps can come off for the engines. Yeah, it's fairly straightforward stuff, really, isn't it, from here on in? So the oxygen supply can be switched off for the crew. The ADIAS system can be turned off. And we're more or less there. Just having a quick scan around. So when you're happy that you've done everything you want to, obviously there's lots of things showing up with cautions, which is absolutely normal. Once you're happy that you've done everything you want to, you can turn the external power off. And then finally just go and turn the batteries off. And the plane goes cold and dark on you. Okay, so there you go. The nice thing about this Inibuilds Airbus that it has some tricks that the out of the box one didn't have. So we can go and open the door, for example, which has just opened this door. Well, we probably need electrics to get to ground to talk to the ground control. Let's have a look. Yeah. So let's go and turn the batteries back on briefly, just to show you the workflow around that. So if we turn the batteries back on, that will give us the comm radios back. There we go. And go to ground services and tune Edinburgh ground. And we can request... It's going to be the wrong way around. It always is. It's a bug in the sim. If we request the baggage service... No, request the boarding. It may go and get the jet bridge. Yep, there you go. It's always a bit backwards. But it's quite cool. Should we see? It should fit quite neatly because it's the Asobo or Inibuilds Asobo aeroplane, so they've probably tuned it to work. Yeah, it works really nicely. Look. There you go. So that was the Inibuilds /Asobo Airbus A320 Neo, the free one you get with the simulator. It's actually pretty good. Obviously there is much more functionality in the Phoenix Airbus, but for a free aircraft it's not bad at all. And as long as you know a little bit about, you know, managing the flight, and like I said, with the spoilers, with the profile, and it not being wonderful at chasing or calculating, you can keep it on track fairly easily. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon. So just before we do go, just a quick reminder, if you want a copy of the procedure that I worked through to get the airplane up and running that you saw, I'll put the link in the notes of the video, so you can go and grab a copy of it. And yeah, it goes through everything you need to do basically, including all of the steps of obviously programming the MCDU, which is probably the most important part with the Airbus because that's its brain. There's also, I was talking about custom views early on. There's a full description in here of configuring custom views in 2024 because it's very different than 2020 in that regard. Okay, right, I really am going to go this time. See you again soon. Take care.